Today's episode brought to you by Hop Valley Alphadelic IPA. Tasty goodness. Happy Friday. So we do have the Alphadelic IPA, very good stuff. This one is a 90 IBU with a 7.2, so it's got a little bit of fire to it. Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about fire. I had a friend of mine at work, and his son Ryland was saying that he was having some issues getting a fire started with his fire steel. So I thought we would just do a fire starting 101 and cover all the bases, as well as covering some tips that may help with the alternative methods of fire starting. 3 things you need for a fire: source of ignition, fuel, and oxygen. We're going to start with the last one, oxygen. It's all around you. The key thing here is about leaving enough space between your fuel so that it can breathe. Oxygen can get in there and fuel the fire. So in the fuel, you have 3 main categories. You actually have the smallest bit of material, which is called tinder, and that's going to be something that will take a spark and generate a coal and create a flame. Then you have kindling, which will catch from a flame, such as like a mat. And then there's actually the fuel itself, or bigger materials of fuel, which will sustain, we'll call it sustaining fuel, which will sustain the fire. So let's take a look. Here we have 2 subcategories of fuel. We've got the larger sustaining pieces, which will keep your fire going for a period of time. And then we've got some kindling. And it's best if you start with very small kindling and then have a little bit larger. Okay, next let's talk about tinder. There's several different kinds of tinder, and you can find it almost anywhere. Some of the most common tinder is paper. You can find that in a lot of places. So birch bark, if you can find it, is also a great source of tinder. Depending on the part of the country you live in, if you're outdoors, out in the woods, whether or not you'll be able to find birch is questionable. Like here in the Pacific Northwest, you typically will not find birch out in the forest, not that I've seen anyway, and not in my area. However, if I go into town, into the city, there's all kinds of birch trees planted for aesthetic purposes. So you can go ahead and collect some birch bark there. Another common one would be some wood shavings or little wood chips. Another one that's really great is char cloth, okay? And we'll go into how you make this. And this is basically cotton cloth that has been almost burnt. It's basically charred, and it will take a spark very nicely. And we'll actually, this is my char cloth container maker, tin maker. So we're actually going to be making some char cloth today. And basically all you need for that is just some strips of t-shirt, cotton t-shirt. Another great tinder is fat wood, okay? And you guys might remember from my other video when I found this piece of fat wood, it's still hanging in there. So we'll use that as well. Ignition sources. So I only have 3 examples here with me today. There is another one that isn't present, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So we have a Bic lighter, by far the best ignition source there is. So I would always recommend that you have 1 or 2 of these around at all times. No battery, nothing. The flint might get worn down. If it gets wet, you can hold it in your hand and dry it, and it will come back to life pretty good. But sometimes when it's wet, it will take a while to do that, and it will wear down the flint that's inside of it. Ferro rod or ferrocerium is a great one. It works in all weather. Creates a very hot spark that is about 5,000 degrees, I think, in that range. Battery, 9-volt battery. Now this ignition source will only work with certain types of tinder, i.e. your steel wool. So that's why we have that there. So we'll give that a try. This is something like common stuff that you have around the house that will help you if you need it in time of a power outage emergency, if you don't happen to have a Bic lighter around, right? So some of these ignition sources will work better with some tinder versus others. The Bic lighter will work with every single one of them. The ferro rod will also work with almost every one of them. I don't know if it'll actually catch a steel wool, but we'll give it a try. I would imagine it would. The battery, however, is only going to work with the steel wool. And basically what you're doing is you're creating a large amount of resistance by crossing the contacts here with your steel wool. It's going to create a circuit, but the circuit's going to be a very poor circuit with a lot of resistance. And the more resistance you have in an electrical circuit, the more heat that builds up, and then you'll have an ignition source. Okay, so let's give a couple of these a go. Let's start with this since we have it here. So basically, all you got to do is just hold it in there. Haven't done this in a while. And it'll take a minute, but it should start to smoke. Oh, there you could almost see it. Mosquitoes. There we go. So again, our lighter will work on anything, so we're not going to worry about it too much. Now, let's look at our ferrocerium rod. And basically the idea is you're just going to, helps if you kind of scrape the paint off. This is a fresh one. Right. Okay, now this little striker that it has a nice little, I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's got a little edge right there that works good for scraping, right? Then you're going to throw your sparks. Right. Right. So let's go ahead and give this a try. There we go. Ta-da. Save that. Let's try some wood chips. Now I'm going to try and show you here let me come on this side. Now you would think, hey, I'm throwing the sparks. You want to go here. Well, what actually ends up happening is because of the way the knife is, let's see if you can see it. Well, it's not going to really work in the air, but the knife will actually, the sparks are going to pick up, hit the end of the knife and get pushed down. So when that happens, it's actually going underneath the knife. So what you want to do is get your striker in the middle of your tinder. Now you can see I'm getting a lot of good sparks in there, and it takes quite a while though before it catches. So this is going to be really, really difficult. I would want to use a lot of these shavings. So again, we'll put it in the middle. You can see it wants to coal, but it's hard. Part of the problem with this is that it's not super duper flammable, right? I mean, it's wood, it'll burn, yeah. But it's also not very aerated. It's very compact. So you see how it smolders. It flamed for a minute and then it smolders because it's not getting the airflow that it needs, right? So in the case of doing it just like this, it's a lot harder. You gotta really work it, and then you want to keep like adding some stuff to it, right? Can be done. Tricky though. One of the things you'll want to have handy is your next piece of fuel, which would be the next size up at the tinder to try. So as soon as it catches a flame, if it can pop a flame, you can get that on there right away. Okay, there's a little bit of flame. We can get it going. and catch our tinder, right, we can get the fire going. There you go. Right, but much harder to use. Now, again, having a tinder ball, little tinder nest like this, something, you could add some of these flakes in here to give it some substance once it starts going. Okay, bam. Okay, works much better. So now let's take a look at the char cloth. Now again, char cloth, just rolled up cloth. We're just gonna tear a piece off. Now, you will need additional tinder sources, right? Because it's not going to, what this is gonna do is it's not gonna flame, it's gonna make an ember. Hopefully you guys can see. Okay, but that'll make a nice coal, and it will coal for a little while. Oh, another type of thing, another tinder that we look at with some cotton, just cotton balls. Right? I bet you we might even be able, if that's still going. Nope, that char cloth is out. But just some straight cotton will go like a charm too. Now, another thing that you can do with your cotton ball is you can actually add some Vaseline to it. So I have a little piece of one here, and basically you just put like a dollop of Vaseline and kind of just mush it all about. You can see we'll take just a very small piece. That one was a whole cotton ball. You can see it's going to create like a nice kind of coal thing too. That we could have added to a tinder bundle. So this is a little guy. I think that's got some of that in it. Now this guy will burn a little bit more intensely. Takes a spark just as well. And it should, you'll notice it's going to flame for a bit longer because it's burning the Vaseline, which is petroleum jelly, right? Flammable. Who knew? Right, this will go for a while. Now we could add our kindling and be off and running. Okay, there we go. So again, just some basic demonstration about, like, you know, how to get that initial fire. What you're gonna want is you're gonna want to have as much tinder as possible. You're gonna want to have your kindling ready. You're gonna want to have the smallest kindling available. You can see I got this, right? This is pretty small, but actually what would be better than all of this would be to take a larger piece of it and make the feathers. Right, if you can, or curls. You don't even have to. I mean, this is not going to feather super well because it's cedar, but making it even smaller, right? Make some little curls. This stuff will catch off one of these embers, right? Let's try it. Let's try it really quick. Let's be prepared this time. The other thing too is you'd be like, oh, hey, that's enough to get going, and I can stick one of these on there. You want to have, especially like if you're out just campfire, out in the backyard, whatever, yeah, you can try using the smallest amount possible. But if you know, hey, I would need like, oh, this should be a good amount of curls to get something going. Yeah, you want to have 3 times what you think is the right amount, because the last thing, if you're in some kind of like, oh, I'm stranded, my car broke down, whatever, I'm trying to make a fire and it's cold out, or lost in the woods because I went day hiking and got turned around, you may only have a very small amount of tinder or a very small amount of ignition source, and you're not going to want to try to have to do this multiple times. You're going to want to have first try and have it go and not have any problems, right? So you're going to want to have extra, as much tinder possible available, have plenty of kindling, and your fuel, sustaining fuel. Now, the sustaining fuel, initially you need to have just enough to get you, going for about an hour or so, right? Or even 15 minutes, so that you can gather more while the fire's burning. But you're going to definitely want to make sure that you have as much of everything as possible before you get started. All right? Okay. We'll do a couple more here. Yeah, the last thing you want to do is, hey, get a fire or a spark going or an ember going, and then, oh, I don't have stuff ready, and then it goes out, and then you're hosed. Okay, so we got a nice little bit there. I could take one of these, use the back of my knife now, try and make some scrapings, which are going to be even smaller bits. I would also recommend using a bigger stick when you're doing this, because you can see how these little guys just want to break. Let's get one of the larger pieces of fur here. All right, got some nice little shavings. They want to stick. So we're going to go back and use some of our char cloth again. You take just a very small piece. Stuff works amazingly well. All right, we'll kind of get it buried in there a little bit. All right, and it'll take the spark, like, turn into ember right away. Now, if I had a way to really pick this up, oh, it doesn't want to go. It's all about getting that ember to get hot enough to flame. Let's let it set for a minute. There you go. And again, you'd want to be loading it up now. Okay. Right. Now what you don't want to do is just drop them all. What you would want to do is get something like a little break like this, which I'm actually going to snap in half. Okay. And then lay them across the top. Oh, see, and then I smothered it a little bit there. All right, we got it back. But yeah, when I hit it, kind of smothered it. You want to crisscross. There's a whole bunch of different methods. You can do kind of like a teepee method. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, don't put it all on at once. You can actually, as long as you're leaving enough room for it to breathe, you can basically put as much on as you want. All right, and there we go. Let me grab my kindling so it doesn't go up in flames. My tinder. Okay, here we are over at the fire pit. You can see what I've done. I have this one old board that was burnt, half burnt. We're going to use it as the fire base. I've got two of my larger pieces of fuel, which I've made like a little bridge there, right? So that I can do the same thing. I didn't get over here in time. But basically, we can do the same technique where when we're laying our kindling on, right, it gives it, there's not airflow, right? And then as I get bigger, I can do the same thing, kind of stack it up. Okay. Let's do some of our plain cotton ball. Stick it on in there. World's best ignition source. We'll get that fired up in no time. Now and again, I can actually start putting this on because I'm leaving room for it to breathe. Now, one thing that you got to be careful with is you don't want to leave too much room. Basically, what will end up happening is, I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of a synergy-based thing. If you have two burning pieces and they are close enough together where they're burning each other, you get a synergy between them and you get a much hotter fire. If you leave too much air, then it will burn, but it'll burn out. All right. Getting smokied. All right, there you go. With that amount of fuel, I should be good for a minimum 20 minutes. So I can go gather more. Although, again, like I said, in any kind of situation where you're depending on that fire, you're going to want to have as much prep work done as possible. All right, so again, we've got our char cloth making tin. So what I've done is I put a hole on one side and a hole on the top. And that's to allow a little bit of breathing, but you don't want too much. The whole idea with this, the way you make it charred, is that you're basically burning it but smothering it at the same time. That's why you do need some thing. So what we're gonna do is, again, I've got some strips of t-shirt. I'm gonna cut this one in half. And all I'm gonna do, Fold it over once and just roll it to a nice little log. Okay. You want to kind of keep it tight. Okay. And what I'm going to do, pack it in my little container. Okay. You don't want to roll it too fat. You want to be able to make sure the lid will close securely. Okay, so again, oh, that didn't get tight. Right. Just roll that nice and tight. Got a little bit of space in between. I've got one other piece here. I'll make this one a bit smaller. You can see it's not as wide. Okay. Now I don't have any formal training on this, but based on the way I know that it works, you don't want a big air gap in there because that will allow the flame to happen. Okay? Try and squish it down as much so fortunately after a while you kind of lose your sealing ability there. So if I don't know if you saw what I did there, so I kind of just bent the outer lip out so that it doesn't actually line up, and then you've got to press a little bit and that'll hold it shut. All right, then all you got to do is stick it in the fire. Now you can see what happened. The inner part of the fire has burned out, and so I've got a big gap there. So I'm losing all that synergy that I was talking about. So this is a situation where we're going to get too much air. So we got to shuffle the fire about a little bit. Bring it in a little bit closer. Now keep the fire burning hot. Get a bit of a stick. All right. All right, there we go. Got a new battery. So we've got it out of the fire. Now one of the things you want to do is let it cool, okay? Because if you open it up while it's really hot, it's going to burst into flame. Because why? Because of that number 3, oxygen. All right, let's give it a look-see. Oh, she looks good. Now you can still see a little bit of color left. All right, where it didn't fully char. And when I'm pushing on it, it's still a little firm. But you see what happened? See where it's kind of whiter? That's where it actually started to really burn. Right? So, and again, I just didn't take a whole bunch of time to roll this stuff up really well. If I had done it a little better job, it would have more uniform, have it packed in there tighter. It's just like cooking. You know, if you put a thick steak and a thin steak on a grill and you try and cook them both till the thick steak is done, that thin steak is going to be burnt. All right, guys, so that's it, Fire Starting 101. If there's any questions or comments or ideas, suggestions that I could have done something better, feel free to leave them in the comments. Go ahead, like the video if you like it, subscribe, ring that notification bell. And from what I understand, liking the video really helps the channel out. So even if you marginally liked it, you know, go ahead and hit that like button, that'd be great. And then share with your friends if you think anyone would be interested in this. If you have other suggestions or want to see other things about how, you know, we can work with the fire or go, you know, I do have a video out there on how to find fat wood. So that would be, you know, look for that. I'll try and link that in the description. So you guys can see. In the Pacific Northwest, it's really easy because you've got, you know, any rotting stump that was a fir tree, bam, fat wood. Down in California, where Ryland lives, I'm pretty sure they have pine trees, which is also another great source. It may be a little bit harder to find because I don't know if you guys remember in the old video here, the fir tree here, they rot down and there's spires left, and the spires are the fat wood that didn't rot. I'm not sure if the pine tree works the same way. I would imagine it does, given the basic premise of what's going on leaving the spire. But I also know that if you find a pine tree or a stump that isn't all rotted down and you know it's pine, the lower branches where they meet the trunk of the tree, if you break those off, there'll be fat wood in those joints. So you can do that. Works great. So yeah, hopefully that helps out, Ryland. Let me know if it doesn't. Let me know what actual issues you're having so that we can focus in on getting that solved for you. Okay, buddy? All right, you guys stay good. Have a good one. All right, quick prologue. Look at that. Got some char cloth. Mostly good. A little bit rare. But when it tears like that, perfect. Let's even take this rare piece. You can see it's plenty good on the outside. Oh, even on the inside, just that one spot where it was butted up against. Oh, look at that. Okay, now you can see where it hit the rare part. Not really doing great. But yeah, it hits the other part. Still good. Look at that. All right, so a couple of different ways to use your ferro rod. There's one where you anchor the ferro rod and then move your striker. The other one is to anchor your striker and move the ferro rod. Okay. In some situations, it's very tight, and moving your hand around, you may be hitting the fire pit, hitting the way you've set up the wood, or your tinder pile, your beginnings of the fire. So sometimes it works better just to throw the sparks like that. If you can, I find it works best when you can anchor your ferro rod. And then you can put your ferro rod in the middle of where you want your sparks, and then you'll get it. Awesome, okay?